Welcome, Ashley Carrington.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the call. Hey, y'all. Welcome to our second One WILPF Call of 2023. As a reminder, these calls are now quarterly, and the next call is Thursday, June 8th, 2023. I'm Ashley Carrington. My pronouns are she, they. I'm located in North Carolina. Co-facilitating with me tonight is Mary Beth Gardam from Iowa. And our technical support guru this evening is Ellen Thomas, who's located in the mountains of North Carolina. This meeting is sponsored by members of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, U.S. section. And as a note, this is a public call, and yes, we are recording. The video will be posted in a few days to WILPF's YouTube channel and the One WILPF Call webpage. Look for those links in the chat and in the text pad. Mary Beth will be placing those in now. WILPF is the oldest women's international peace organization in the world, founded in 1915 by Jane Addams of Hull House. There are WILPF branches across the US, and we are one of 50 WILPF sections around the world. You can find out more and join us at our website, www.wilpfus.org/join. And that information is also located in the text pad and in the chat. And Mary Beth will be placing that in the chat as well. These One WILPF calls connect our organization to one another and keep us strong across the United States. We are women-centered, though we welcome male, queer, and members of the trans community as well. We are urgently looking for amazing detail-oriented volunteers to help plan and facilitate the future One WILPF calls. So please contact us at info@wilpfus.org to find out more or how you can help support. A few housekeeping notes. Please remain muted when you are not speaking to reduce background noise. Please place any questions or comments in the chat. And speaking of which, we will be posting the agenda in the chat now so you guys can keep up with what we're doing and where we are. There is also a Google Doc text pad where you can add information. Please make sure to add your relevant information under the red line. You'll see that in the text pad. Look for that link to the text pad in the chat as well. All right, y'all, we're about to get started. So let's roll call. Place your name, your pronouns, and location in the chat to show us where you're from. Now I'm passing it over to Mary Beth. Mary Beth?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary Beth Gardam, and there is a lot going on in the world of peace activism right now. A lot of organizing across the country and a lot of going on in WILPF US. We'll hear about some of those happenings, some planned actions you can participate in or lead in your community, and announcements from our National Issue Committee chairs too. And I'd be remiss to omit a celebration of International Women's Day. It was marked around the world yesterday, March 8th. WILPF US representatives attended the United Nations CSW Commission on the Status of Women in New York City. They've been there this whole week, and they brought with them 4 young women, students from Boston University and Florida International University in Miami. The students' photos are on the text pad. If you want to look at that, it's the Google Doc we shared the link to. They are part of our annual practicum for advocacy program at the UN that we offer each year, bringing young women and college and grad students to the CSW from across the country. We were unable to do this the last 3 years because of COVID, but we're delighted that we could continue it in 2023. WILPF maintains consultative status at the UN, having been a midwife at its birth and having proposed the League of Nations before the UN got started. Ashley?
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
sorry. The last several years, things have been extremely tough financially for workers and families. The Coalition for National Infrastructure Bank reports that core inflation jumped from 4.6 to 4.7% in January, bringing with it a tight labor market and robust consumer spending, especially for services. That brought raised prices, but wages have not kept up. The Fed raised interest rates again to attempt to slow the economy, but experts are still predicting a recession that is likely to start this year. This is terrifying for the 140 million poor or low-income individuals in the United States already living on the financial edge.
Standard & Poor's Global reported that 1.3 million jobs will be lost, most likely in 2023, mostly in construction, professional and business services, manufacturing, education, and healthcare. Meanwhile, wages continue to lag behind inflation and rents, prompting many, many families to finance basic purchases using their credit cards. And ultimately, that's unsustainable given high and rising credit card interest rates. WILPF's National Issue Committee, Women, Money, and Democracy, and our partner, An Economy of Our Own, have long been warning about the inaccuracy of measuring a nation's financial well-being through a gross domestic product index alone, the GDP, without taking into consideration other factors that more closely represent the actual goals that real people want to prioritize in their national and in their personal budgets. There are many far better financial indicators than the GDP, including Rianne Eisler's Caring Economy indicator. And now the American Compass think tank is also proposing a cost of thriving index, which measures the number of weeks a typical worker would need to work in a given year to earn enough income to cover a year's worth of major expenses for a middle-class family of four, for food, housing, healthcare, transportation, and higher education. In 1984, in those golden days, the CODI, Cost of Thriving Index, was 40 weeks, with 12 weeks of income left over to spend on other variables. But by 2022, the CODI was 62 weeks. That means the same family of four would be in the hole by 10 weeks each year, forcing one or more of the parents to work multiple jobs. And of course, that's what we're seeing now. This increased CODI helps explain why families are leaving expensive coastal cities, young men are dropping out of the workforce, marriage rates are declining, and crime is rising. Ashley?
Yes. So I'm not like technically, I'm trying to unmute, sorry. Okay. That middle-class family of four facing such extreme financial hardships is caught in a dilemma. However, white families can often fall back on the safety net from generational wealth. People of color and marginalized communities are often financially disadvantaged, face much harder financial deficits, and have been for many decades. Add to that the documented racism of Wall Street banks in dealing with people of color, denying loans, increasing barriers, and the challenges are systemic and seemingly unsurmountable. In the books, The Color of Money by Mishara Baradaran, and The White Wall by Emily Flitter, you can read how the banking system discriminates against poor people and people of color, and how banking while Black has been fraught for decades. So what are those systematically disenfranchised poor people to do amid pressures on all sides? Our speaker tonight is here to present some financial solutions being created by the most vulnerable women. those affected by both mounting financial pressures and the explicit bias of banks who reject loans and levy extra fees and penalties. We want to thank An Economy of Our Own for bringing the speaker to our attention. She was featured on one of AEOO's previous Zoom conversations, and that recording is being dropped into the chat. As you listen, please jot down any questions for Dr. Hossein and place them in the chat. We will get to them during the Q&A portion. Dr. Caroline Shanaz Hossein is a Canadian Research Chair for Africana Development and Feminist Political Economy. She is Associate Professor of Global Development and teaches graduate core development programs in political science for PhD students at the University of Toronto. She is founder of Diverse Solidarity Economies, DISE, Collective, and serves as board member to the International Association of Feminist Economics. She is advisor to Oxford University Press, editorial board member to the UN Task Force for the Social and Solidarity Economy Review for Black Political Economy, and Kerala University's journal, Polity and Science and Society. Caroline is the author of many papers on politicized microfinance and the Black social economy. She has 2 new books coming out, The Banker Ladies and Cooperatism. The Banker Ladies is also being filmed as a documentary. Prior to being an academic, Caroline worked in global nonprofits and as a consultant to the World Bank and the Aga Khan Foundation. Welcome, Dr. Hossein. Could you tell us who the Banker Ladies are, how their financial solutions are changing the paradigm for unbanked and poor families, and why it matters in the bigger economic overview?
Shall I share my, thank you very much, Ms. Kerrigan. Shall I share my screen now? Yes.
Sure. I was on a call that Carolyn was on last night with the Banker Ladies, and I just have to tell you that it was a very invigorating way to learn about women power on International Women's Day.
So thank you very much for having me. I can't seem to see myself or all of you on this, but so I'm going to kind of just go with it. Can everyone hear me okay and see the screen?
Yeah.
I can't see anyone right now. I don't know why it's not allowing me. I'd like to thank WILPF for having me. It's a real honor. I'm a big fan of the work that you're doing. I see that you're here in my country, Canada. And it's so refreshing to be in a community of women, feminist activists, really thinking through a feminist logic to make sure that we think differently about the ways in which our world operates. So thank you for all of the work that you're doing. My name is Caroline Shanaz Hossein, and I'm going to speak a little bit about the Banker Ladies. I think I have about 20 minutes, so forgive me if I'm rushing a little too quickly, but if any of you want to get in touch with me, this is where I am. I'm currently the new director, interim director for the Institute for Inclusive Economies and Sustainable Livelihoods at the University of Toronto. So if folks want to be in touch or connect with what we're doing, please feel free to be in touch. As Mary Beth said, and she was so kindly joining us yesterday, she came to an event that was organized by these women who organize self-help mutual aid financing groups, which are community-based in their own communities around the Toronto area. And their conferences are community-led. Many of the women never had internet or have participated in such events before. And for years now, we've been doing this work, and now they're at a stage where they're pushing for transformation, pushing for the recognition of these community-based banks, which I'll speak about in a moment. But first, let me tell you a little bit about who I am. As Ms. Kerrigan said, I'm a part of the global board for IAFE, which is a feminist economics association. But I also have my own scholarly collective called the Diverse Solidarity Economies Collective, made up of the women that you see here on the screen. And really what we're fighting for is a new way to think about business in society, one that is inherently feminist, that's thinking about reciprocity, less about profit making, and more about how do we invest in things like reciprocity, community development, and really feed into those ideas of trust and well-being. Here are some of the books that I'm publishing. If any of you want materials that I have, feel free to be in touch with me. I know these things get costly, so there are ways that I can assist and share materials. I'll be happy to do that with your network. But a new book that's coming out is called Beyond Racial Capitalism. That might be interesting for some of your members. It's going to look at cooperatives among the African diaspora across the Americas, and that's coming out with Oxford. You'll see on my website, and I'll drop it in the link in your chat afterwards. It's called africanaeconomics.com. Lots of free information and materials that anyone wants to read up on is located on that site. Think of it as a portal, and you keep opening it, and there's lots of wonderful things to explore, like podcasts being run by students and community people. So right now, what I'm going to speak about in the 15 minutes that I have remaining is this book that I've been working on for about a decade called The Banker Ladies. The Banker Ladies are women who are locally rooted in Toronto and in several countries in the Caribbean, and they participate in these mutual aid financing groups called ROSCAs, and I'll speak about them in a moment. So this topic is very much of interest to me, mainly because of my own when I reach back to my own heritage. Actually, my great-grandmother out of Trinidad, in Sandy Grande, Trinidad, was what we call a Susu banker, someone who was a community leader who organized informal financial banks to help vendors who were working in the informal economy. And when my parents emigrated via New York City, that's where I was born, to Canada, Toronto, Canada, they found themselves without credit, without sort of the right appropriate networks to connect. And what they drew on were community or cultural supports in the Toronto area back in the early 70s. And so a lot of my growing up was precarious, to be quite honest, and the solidarity or the social economy, community organizations was pretty much a part of my life. And so I knew that what I wanted to do was to really invest in ways to assist people to have access to goods and services. And so I don't know how many of you are from the Philly area, but I lived there for some time, and I worked with a civil rights activist by the name of Reverend Leon Sullivan, who's here in this photo on the bottom right, who's the founder of OIC International. And what I learned from African Americans during the time that I was in Philadelphia was how to do business more equitably, how to think about business not only as a profit-making, commercialized way to benefit oneself, but how do you do that to develop community and help others? So the topic today is ROSCAs. For those of you that are new with this is a global phenomenon. It's called Rotating Savings and Credit Associations. It's practiced everywhere in the world, including in the United States. It's known as the JAR system among African Americans in certain states across the US. But lots and lots of immigrants in Canada and the US, Europe, and elsewhere around the global South practice these ROSCA systems, and they have their own cultural names. These ROSCA systems are like, if you can imagine, cooperative banks. They're based on membership, pretty much like WILPF. You depend on the members to participate and decide on the governance of how things will be structured. And with that goes the local colloquial names. So for example, in Ghana or Trinidad, they'll use the term Susu. In Jamaica, it might be Patna. In Gambia, it might be Osusu. In Haiti, Seoul. South Africa, Stockbells, and so on. But these kinds of ROSCAs are not just known among the African diaspora. My research is focusing on that, but Chinese have hua, Indians have chit or chitus. So globally around the world, people have this system called Roscas. And, Roscas may seem like this informal, unclear sort of banking system, but actually feminist economic geographers by the name of Gibson Graham, they're two authors, but published as one, have this whole big theory, many of you may have heard of, community economies. And if you look at it, they liken it to an iceberg, where the capitalist patriarchal model is mostly the small part of the iceberg that we see, right? That's present. But actually, most of life's wonderful transactions, the ways in which we actually live, and it's messy, is hidden, so which is the substantive part of an iceberg. So the point of this research is really to pluralize economics, to show that there's difference is very important. And it's not to eradicate or do away with the capitalist system. If people want to participate in it, fine. But right now, what that dominant system is doing is silencing other kinds of people-focused economies. And so that's where we are today. And part of the work that I'm doing is to try and think through how can we have more equitable kind of financial economies. Definitely the ways we think about development and helping those who are the most excluded needs a different design from the one we have. And I rely and draw on a lot of political economy literatures, mostly Black and feminist political economy literature. And to say here tonight that there's an abundance of this literature in our world. It's just that a lot of it has been erased, or it's not often being cited or considered relevant in understanding how economics has been designed as a system to alienate certain groups of people. The works of Cedric Robinson's Racial Capitalism, Jessica Gordon Nemhard's Collective Courage, Marcus Garvey's lived experience, and his own writings about self-initiative have been really instrumental for me and my personal development. So these Rosca banks, these community banks, to give you an idea, I'm looking at women across the Americas, including Canada. My research will be extending with my fellow DICE collective members to the United States. Some folks are already working on the JAR system, but we want to also uncover ideas about Roscas in other parts of the US. So if anyone on the call, or if you know anyone who might be interested in this, I'm always interested in research associates who want to do this kind of work, primarily focusing on Black immigrant women who are participating in these Rosca systems. So I'm speaking to hundreds of them, mostly the chief banker ladies. These groups can range anywhere from about a dozen people to hundreds, literally. So if you take the 443 women, you multiply that, right, by about 30 members on average, right? And that's a conservative estimate. You can see quite clearly that these chief banker ladies are representing literally thousands of people. The theory that I draw on a lot, and it's really still an emerging theory, is this idea of called the Black social economy. I will give a copy of this 2-minute link to Mary Beth at some point so that, she can share it with many of you later. And it's only a 2-minute fun animation. But the Black social economy is this idea of really engaging with these applied, grounded theories of people who are not just waiting on the sidelines for help, but are actually engaging in cooperative institutions and mutual aid forms of institutions. In looking at the Caribbean and the Canadian case, what I found is a divergence. Where I'm looking at banker ladies in the Caribbean, which some of you might see as very global South. And then I'm looking at women from Africa and the Caribbean who have emigrated and have become Canadians in both two of our major cities, Toronto and Montreal. And what I found, and probably that's what's holding up my book, is that Canada has a very stressful story for the world about the way that it treats its banker ladies, unlike the Caribbean. And so I've been writing about the Rosca system to make sure that Canadians see that this is a vibrant part of our social economy, just as nonprofits are, and cooperatives and credit unions. so are these women-led cooperative informal institutions. In the Caribbean and across the world quite generally, actually, these systems, these ROSCA systems that people participate voluntarily in are really respected by its users, even if it's informal, even if it's organized informally. I mean, people still value it, and it's purposefully informal. It's not to be seen as something that's less or inferior. And when studies have been conducted around the world, these systems tend to be top of list for many people in the type of devices they can count on. In fact, in parts of the Caribbean, formalized banks, commercial banks, will name their product lines like after these informal ROSCA systems. They'll have the partner plan or Sojasol to tap into these really dynamic women who are organizing these systems on the fringes. This is a quote from a woman in Grenada that I met. Her name is Mummy. For Mummy, a spice seller in Grenada in one of the main markets, she sees that Susu, which is a ROSCA, is being something really vital to her livelihood needs, to be able to run her business, to meet the things that she has to pay for. She knows that the banker lady or the person who's in charge of that fund will be there to support. These ROSCA systems are about solidarity. It's about women coming together on their own terms and deciding how they want to do their own business, but also how do they invest in community development without waiting for any kind of subsidies that may have, strings attached. And part of this issue in the Caribbean, and this was my first book, was that there was corruption in parts of the Caribbean when I was looking at more formalized, targeted poverty alleviation, microfinance type programs. And what I found as a way out for women who didn't want to be captured by any kind of elite or corrupt boss, or they call them big bosses or gangsters, was to participate in these local community cooperative banks. In Guyana, they have Boxhand, Trinidad Susu, Jamaica Partner. And it was a way for them as women to reject any kind of clientelistic or any kind of elite or racial bias that could be, imposed on these women who are definitely living in marginalized communities. Whereas the local community banks that they formed, they wouldn't have to be as compliant to handouts if they were to take those handouts. In the Canadian case, the story is a bit different and to some surprising, and probably that's what's holding up the peer review of my book. But basically the story in Canada is that there are a lot of harms being done towards banker ladies in Toronto and Montreal. These women are being stigmatized, and the work that they do in organizing these ROSCAs is completely ignored. But they continue to do this work. You can see here that women do know that there's a negative stereotype against them participating as cooperators, and they know where that's coming from. It's coming from because they choose membership and they choose cooperation. And in a dominant market system that privileges individuality and entrepreneurship and commercialization, that's not something people are prepared to see or to support. I'm just going to play a little clip of this, but it's open access. It's on Films for Action. So if you want to Google it later, you type in Films for Action, and this short 20-minute documentary will come up, but this is just a trailer called The Banker Ladies. Wasn't my idea to create this film. It was the women, because they felt to change mindset, we actually had to create a film so that we could stop the harm and the violence. I'll play it now.
But also, so if you have it in your country, you still bring it. So when you go, you meet people from your country, you say, oh, you remember Osuso? They say, yes. You remember when we used to do it back home? So why don't we do it back?
So we developed a structure that was different, slightly different than the one that my mom and her friends used.
And you taught me itself when we have a group organization of women to $200. I get the $2,000.
That make me independent. I feel a power. So I have something.
So we have these banker ladies who have been just doing really magnificent work in terms of really continuing the Canadian legacy of cooperativism. Canada, like the US, have a rich legacy of credit unions and cooperatives. And, Canada actually brought that down to New Hampshire after learning about these credit unions in, the Riesland of, with the Raiffeisen credit unions in Germany. The Underground Railroad that moved up north to look for the North Star and into southern Ontario and southern Canada. Some can say that it was a cooperative of sorts, but it was dangerous to have it exposed in public as a cooperative, right? We know that the moving of the bodies of African bodies to the north could be dangerous. So those cooperatives were underground, right? But when people settled in Canada, they used something called the true bands. That was a Rosca system. It was money and in-kind donations that would be circulated around the group to help people then set up their new lives. Desjardins is one of our oldest credit unions, one of the most successful, 6th largest financial retailer in Canada, but it too started off informally. French Catholics were seen as a minority and being persecuted by Anglophone Protestants. So imagine, way back in the 1900s, this kind of informal caisse populaire existed, and now it has become a formalized, real powerhouse credit union in the Canadian context. The anti-Ganesh movement in eastern part of Canada and Nova Scotia, real rich with sort of adult pedagogy, teaching people about cooperativism. All of that was informal. Today, actually, it's the site of teaching about cooperativism, but no one mentions ever the kind of work that these Rosca women, Black, Brown, other racialized Indigenous women are doing across the country. COVID has taught us that solidarity and cooperation is really important. And so it, in some ways, makes my work easy. It's also exposed, right, economic inequities, as Ms. Carrington was just talking about, right? So Roscas are here in our localities. It's where you are in the US as well, no doubt. And it's a way of women pooling resources together and to assist each other in turn to access a lump sum of funds. So think of it as a forced saving mechanism, but beyond the financial transaction, women come to these groups, and that's what my research is showing, more for the camaraderie, the friendship, the sense of belonging, and to stop and to deal with the unnecessary harms that people feel with things like anti-Black racism and sexism and what have you. Not only are we not seeing the work these women are doing, but they are being vilified. They are being called terrorists. They are being told that they are engaged in money laundering. Their funds are being confiscated by the police, and that is why they wanted the film, right? But when you think of all these harms, no one's even thinking about the service that they're doing in building up peace and stability in really poor, marginalized communities by creating this idea of cooperativism. And we don't even think about the notion that we should be remunerating these women for all the extra work and labor that they're doing. Instead, we extract it and then we vilify them for participating in these kinds of informal cooperatives. What's inspiring here, and I hope to leave with you today, how am I doing on time? I'm really delinquent on time, you know.
You're doing good. You have maybe another 2-3 minutes.
Okay, I'll get to it. So what's really inspiring here is that these women are younger generation are thinking through how Rosca informal cooperatives can help them. So what you see before you are 2 Canadian women, one of Somali heritage and the other one of Jamaican. And they both ran for political office. municipal and provincial levels here in our country. And to be able to run for political office, like in the US, is very expensive. But what they tapped into were these money pooling Rosca systems to let them afford to run for political office. So wait a second. So what we have here is that an informal, vilified system that women have been doing globally for a very long time around the world is being treated as an illicit form of activity. But here you have a younger generation of women who see its value in Canadian society, are using it, tapping into those pooled, mobilized resources so that they can run for elected office. So for me, as a political scientist, I find that very interesting, and I hope there'll be more research on this kind of thing. Maybe it's a way of getting more women from various and diverse backgrounds to start running. And what I do know is that in spite of all the atrocities and the violence that is happening against women who are intent on keeping these Rosca systems going in the Canadian environment, is that they're not going to give up. You hear this quote, you can read this quote from Fardosa, a Somali-born Canadian, who says to us, people may look at us, like in a bad way, and think that when we participate in these Hagbad systems, that's a Rosca, it's seen as though it's inferior, right? And they say, oh, this is just some weird Somali culture thing. But for them, they see it as a form of self-help. It's a form of business, but it's also something that has an important social dimension. It's a way that women come together and they collaborate, but they also think through the politics of the day. So my call for all of you feminist activists on this call is get word out about what the Rosca systems are. Think about those immigrant women where you're located. Ask them about these. They may not know the term Rosca, but they may have their own local name for it. And what we know is that in Canada, it may seem like a strange phenomenon, but around the globe, Kerala, Ghana, South Africa, they have formalized aspects of these Rosca systems. South Africa has the National Stockville Association. In Kerala, they have prosperity for family system called the Kundumbashri. And in Ghana has the Susu system that is a part of its financial ecosystem. So I present to you the Banker Ladies. The Banker Ladies Council was launched last year. Here's the group of women. They span across the city of Toronto. Many more are contacting me across the city. There are Banker Ladies in the US who come to our events, who are interested because they see that this space is starting to validate and that they no longer have to be in hiding. I thank you for your time, and I hope we can keep in touch.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. This is so fascinating, especially when we know that here a lot of the pushback that people get for trying to do alternative kinds of financing is from, the big Wall Street banks. So it's interesting to look at this more closely and see what's happening around the world and compare it with what's happening in North America.
Especially if we can see connections with public banking, more ethical forms of banking, this community-based banking. I don't understand why these women have to be living in fear and harms. Like, I'm actually going to be an expert witness because police will confiscate the funds and not return it to them and accuse them of doing illicit underground activities, just because of the stereotypes.
We did run into that. WILPF International has run into that with trying to fund women who were helping other women with education and trying to get them out of perilous situations in Afghanistan and other places. They were victims of new anti-terrorism laws that made it much more difficult to send money between even cities or states to get money to women who were trying to do good things with it. So we have some questions in the chat. Julie Kabukani, who is from Boston, asked about the study, and I think she'd like to know how to access that. You're on mute, Karen.
Yes. Thank you very much. Hi, Julie. I haven't been following the chat. Sorry. Sort of like this one focus kind of person. But thank you, Julie, for that. Are you on the call? Do I see you there?
Yes, I am. Sorry. I'm at
perfect.
work, so I'm trying to do two things
No,
at the
no
same
worries.
time.
And you call
But
it,
this is very interesting.
what do you call it?
I'm sorry.
What is the name?
Moziki. We call it Moziki.
And where's
So
that from? I don't even know that one.
that is from the Democratic Republic of Congo.
But
And I know there is.
they also have Restourne.
Ristourne, but they also have what they call Moziki. So Moziki is for women only. So we have a group of women. There are about 25 of us. We meet every second Saturday of the month, and then we all contribute $200 that we give to the host. And then she gets so everyone will get that every month. And then with that money, it really helps us. You know, some people even buy home. It helped them to get a mortgage. Some of them, it helped them with their children education. So, and we call that Moziki. And I don't think it's illegal. It's just people, it's like a, So yeah,
And
so I'm very interested.
Where are you located in?
I'm in Boston.
Oh, I'm going to be coming there in May.
Oh, great. We'll be so happy to have you.
Yeah, so
we can talk more
I'm doing a
about
talk
this.
actually at Harvard. So I would love to get out of that place and see actual women
We
doing
will
stuff.
we will invite you to one of our meetings. So you can also, it's also a way for us to socialize, because you mentioned that.
Yep.
It's a great way for us to socialize. The host will cook food, Congolese food, and then we'll have some music, people will dance. So it's really a great way for us to socialize in this different culture. So yeah, we'll be happy to have you to one of our meetings. It's every second Saturday of the month.
So I have just dropped my email into the chat for you, Julie, and any of your colleagues here on the call, so you can be in touch with me.
Okay, Beth Wilson asks, how does microfinance relate to Roscas?
Oh, I like that question. Where are you, Beth? Do I see? Oh, there you are. You're okay, there you are. I see you. Okay, great. Hi. Yeah, so my first book was Politicized Microfinance. This Rosca system, if I had done that as a PhD, I probably wouldn't have gotten my PhD. It seems so troubling to most people. I feel like even the first job I had, academic job, when I was going through tenure, the Rosca system was so problematic in so many ways. The research, my research path studying Roscas has been so complex, because not only are authorities problematic to the banker ladies, but I also found within the academy and people who value or who decide what research matters could not get their heads around that this Rosca system was worthy of study, if that makes any sense. But microfinance, actually, that was my first piece of work in the Caribbean. I looked at something called politicized microfinance. You might find a really cheap used copy, or email me and we can figure something out if you like PDFs. Microfinance, if you look at if you trace its genealogy, one would say that a lot of that came out of these Rosca funds, this money pooling, gifting of lump sums of money to people to reach their livelihood needs. Microfinance, in so many ways, in the ways it's been unfolded across the global South is really sort of copying a lot of these ancient Rosca systems. But except microfinance needs subsidies to be able to do that, right? So it's external funds then being on lent with very high interest rates to communities, yeah? Whereas the Rosca funds are self-managed, and I like to compare them more to a cooperative bank, in that members are the ones who determine their governance and their structure, and if fees will be applied or not applied, and what are the terms, and do they meet weekly or bi-weekly or every other Saturday, like Juliet just mentioned. Like, the members decide with their executive how that will roll out. So there are some very similar trajectories between Roscas and microfinance, but think of Roscas as being homegrown, self-managed, and really abiding by the principles of cooperativism, which is really different from microfinance in that so much of it has become very commercialized. I hope I answered your question.
Stacy Fatale asked a question that I had also. Do you earn interest from putting your money in Roscas? And do the members vote on political donations? How do the members ensure their funds? Is it all in the form of cash or coins? I'm just thinking of the concrete things I know, since I don't know the system.
Okay, welcome. Thank you for asking that question. It's great. So like I said, these systems aren't really focused on profit making. So it's a very different concept. It's more about mutual aid and reciprocity. And I'm saying that because there has now been so many sort of, I mean, the fintech revolution has taken off, right? And Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. But as you look at how those systems have, been so successful in places like East Africa, a lot of it is because they've looked at the Chama system, which is a Rosca system in that part of the world, that has been very important to the sellers that run basically the local economy in Kenya. It's all those mamas in the Kenyan markets. So fintech looks at those kinds of interest rates, right? They're not a Rosca. But the real original Roscas was really about self-help. It was about mutual aid and reciprocity. It was really about building your own wealth creation. It was focused on savings, right? Like kind of like a credit union, right? The savings component is very key, as opposed to shareholder investor interest model. And I'm saying that tentatively because Roscas, again, are developed based on the governance by its own members. So there are Roscas that might charge a fee to its members. The members, of course, determine whether that's okay. And it's usually to recover the costs that the chief banker lady, if she has hundreds of members, there might be costs involved there. Or issues like with transport or keeping it safe, depending on their context. But it's members who will determine what kind of fees they'll pay. So it's not a money-making, interest-focused type of activity. It's really about getting lump sums of cash. So you have a group of 10 people. For example, everyone wants to give, $100 a month. What is that? $1,000 after 10 months. Everyone will take a month, save, and make sure that that one person gets a lump sum. So you have 10 members meet. Everyone says we're pitching in $100. I get the first 1,000. Then the next month, it's Mary Beth's turn. We all pitch in. And so you basically are putting in what you take out. So it's not a pyramid scheme, right? There's no interest to be made. But that's the kind of like scandalizing that people do with these Rosca systems. They say, oh, it's a pyramid scheme. No, if you're engaging in a Rosca where there's money to be made, then it's not really a Rosca. It's really a savings, a form of savings. I guess you could do that, maybe Stacy might ask, well, I could probably do that myself. But a lot of people feel that, you know, it's kind of helpful to have a group of people who are cheering you on to get that done, right? Some people can't get a lump sum of funds for a sideline business that they're trying to do. So what a great way to have a group of people come together. And like Juliet said, people are paying tuition, people are investing in certain types of inventory they might need for business that is sort of done out of the home. People are putting down payments on cars, all kinds of things, paying their RSP payments in a lump sum, just I need it before April or whatever the month is.
That's your tax.
Yes, that's right. Like, so every year, or retirement savings plan, people are using it for various livelihoods. So if they have a wedding or a major, you know, life event, they may need it for a specific period. So they'll make sure when they're participating that the group knows that uphand. But it's a way of getting a lump sum of cash, and then you just participate during that cycle that they have, and you're just contributing, and you only contribute what you put into it, basically.
I think the takeaway for me anyway is that this is a system that empowers women who really need to rely on each other because of the discrimination they face at banks and everywhere else in life. And it also gives them a way of socializing, which may be the only approved way that they have in their community. And it's also a way to propose and employ an alternate kinds of banking that is not built on the profit over people model. So I think there's a lot to be said for it. And I just...
Yes.
Virginia Pratt says it's a bit like what people in the Amish community do. Yes, I think that's
yes.
true.
Yeah, the Mennonites have it. I used to work with the Mennonites, and they do this too, right? Lots of Jewish community, people in the Jewish community have their systems. Irish guilds used to do this as well. I mean, this system is like global, right? I mean, it doesn't really, we underestimate the social dimension of it. And that's what I think is the most impressive from the research I'm finding. I started off looking at more of the financial aspects of how to get access to funding. But then I started realizing it's really the social dimension that's really important. How do you repair harms? You know, women, you know, they have fish samosa parties and everyone will talk about, you know, struggles of life. And it could just be how to deal with menfolk or the kids who are complex or what have you. But it was a way, and see, that's all civic society building. So my claim right now is to ask the Canadian state, why are we calling these women heroes during the pandemic for the menial low-paid labor that they give in our grocery stores or as personal support workers and bus drivers or school cafeteria helpers, but we don't recognize the community economic development that they are doing in these really marginalized communities. Not even the nonprofits that are extremely well subsidized in Toronto can go into those communities like these women can. So I'm actually seeing, yeah, someone just said like it's building social capital, but they're doing it for free and all this extractive labor. And you as feminists all know that it's almost like we're constantly giving away our labor without anyone seeing it as a form of, you know, community building. And that kind of labor should be recognized and not being harmed or vilified or just erased, right?
If anyone has more questions for Carolyn, I hope that you all contact her at her email address that she so graciously shared, or you can contact me and I'll pass them on to her. But I'm afraid we have to move on. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Caroline. A real pleasure to be with all of you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Caroline. With all the heaviness and worry about finances and economic forecasts, your reminder on the day after International Women's Day that we have answers and remedies among ourselves and can advocate for them together is very reassuring. Feel free to stay with us for the rest of our meeting, but we understand if you have to jump off, and thank you again for being with us.
Okay, we have some important national announcements to get to. You won't want to go away. As we mentioned, these calls are less frequent during 2023, occurring just quarterly. So there'll be likely events and plans announced further out on our WILPF calendar. We hope this extra time helps our members, branches, and the public get actions onto their calendars in plenty of time to engage with other branches, members, and allies. And I remind you to check the text pad for details from the announcements you'll be hearing. Let's begin by hearing from the WILPF Disarm Committee's Ellen Thomas. Disarm is the oldest national committee in WILPF US, and Ellen has some sad news to share. Ellen?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I have a couple of pieces of sad news to share. Top of the list is that our own Carol Erner, long a Disarm End Wars Committee chair and a member of the board of WILPF, and a beautiful human being, has passed on January 30th of this year. And her son, Kirby, I spoke to him yesterday, and he apologized for not letting us know sooner. It's been sort of devastating for the family, and but they are in the process of putting together a memorial with the local Quakers in Portland, Oregon, where she lived with Kirby. And I think that the Disarm Committee will probably want to have some kind of an event specifically for WILPF members. Carol and I traveled around the country in 2015, 16, and 17, visiting with branches all over the country, going and visiting representatives to support Eleanor Holmes Norton's Nuclear Weapons Abolition and Economic and Energy Conversion Act. And she is someone that I've missed for a while because she retired a few years ago, but we'll really miss her. And then the second bad piece of news is that Daniel Ellsberg has announced that he has been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and he's not going to do chemotherapy because it probably wouldn't help. And he says he feels pretty well still. They say he's got 3 to 6 months to live, and he's going to continue talking about getting rid of nuclear weapons until he can't talk anymore, he says. So be on the lookout, because there will be people showing him speaking at various events. Cheryl Spencer, co-chair of the Disarm Committee, was not able to be here tonight, but she asked me to ask you to help stop the war in Ukraine with joining in action. WILPF members all over the US, please join a huge Peace in Ukraine rally in Washington, D.C. on Saturday, 18th of March at 1 p.m. Eastern Time at the White House, or one of the sister rallies in other cities. Buses will be available from many East Coast cities to get people into D.C., and many anti-war organizations are collaborating on this 20th anniversary of the Iraq War to protest the continuation of the war in Ukraine. WILPF US has formally endorsed this rally and urges our members to attend one of the rallies on March 18th. Besides DC, there will be rallies in Ann Arbor, Detroit, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, and more are being added. And you can find details of where exactly to meet by going to peaceinukraine.org and scrolling down. And you can also go to codepink.org/PIU20 Iraq. It's in the text pad, and also I will put it in the chat. The demonstrations will make connections between the human and financial toll of U.S. militarism at home and abroad. Key demands include end the $100 billion in arms shipments to Ukraine, end NATO, stop the permanent war economy that funnels trillions of dollars away from jobs, education, and healthcare. Negotiations now. The people of the U.S. are not interested in the possibility of nuclear war, nor the Pentagon's policy of weakening Russia, and no to China, war with China. You can write to disarmchair@wilpus.org for more information. Thank you. Mary Beth, are you there?
Yeah, I
Mary
was
Beth?
waiting for
It skipped,
Ashley.
it skipped mine, so it goes to you now.
Okay, thanks, Ellen. I'll just take a moment to announce that the Women, Money, and Democracy Committee co-sponsored a webinar on February 23rd, The Future in Our Pockets, Making Money Work for the Common Good. Our partner and presenter that night was Alliance for Just Money, and they did a great job explaining how the way our money is created and distributed contributes to wealth inequality and the insurmountable wall of debt that submerges the hopes and dreams of most Americans, and how reforming our money could change all that, even help us stop funding wars. So you can see the presentation on our YouTube channel, and I'll put that link into the chat. And our section president, Darian DeLu, is next with some announcement from WILPF US. Darian?
Thank you. Thank you. That was a quick introduction, and I'm going to change my virtual background while I tell you exciting things going on in WILPF land. You know, some of us just stick around through wind and rain like lichens that form on aged wood. And I think WILPF members are solidly aged in many cases with experience of a lifetime, such as Carol Erner, who brought so much to us. And we're looking for more women who can dedicate time, energy, and passion to committee work in WILPF. We have a membership development committee, a personnel committee, a development committee, a nominating committee, and also other committees, the finance committee, the National Congress committee, the program committee, and on and on. We seek volunteers who are interested in being members on these committees with the possibility of eventually developing the experience, which perhaps you already have, and background to carry on the work in a skillful way. We rely on volunteer support to accomplish this, and the committee experience is very rich. As we come up in 2024 on our next WILPF National Congress, I've been reading about the Leadership Institute of past Congresses and remembering the opportunity to work with Laura Dewey at the Chicago Congress and others to put on the Leadership Institute for WILPF. Perhaps that will happen again. Do we have volunteers for the nominating committee, which is the sponsor of the Leadership Institute? We welcome your participation. Please contact me if you're interested in ad hoc, or the committees I named are all standing board committees. I'm reachable at president@wilpfus.org. That's WILPFUS.org, president@wilpfus.org. Additionally, we do have the Congress coming up in 2024, and we're looking for a good location for a site. Is your neighborhood one with lots of activism, justice, peace work going on? Or do you have cultural riches that you could share with our national membership? We want to feature branches that may be having pet projects. And if your branch has a pet project that you would like to have featured at the Congress, Also, please let me know, because we have program work to do. We have site selection, and the bids for sites, the deadline has been extended to March 20th, noon on Monday, March 20th. So talk to your branch, talk to your progressive community. Are you ready to bring national attention to your town, to spread the word about WILPF in your community, to excite and energize your members on paper by having an opportunity to attend a Congress, to be part of the staff that put on the Congress? It's all a possibility. Please feel free to contact me with your questions. I think that's more than my 5 minutes. We've got a lot going on. Thank you very much.
Those sounds like really good ways to get involved with leadership in WILPF. Thank you, Darian. Our Incredible Earth Democracy Committee has a reminder about an important upcoming event. So let's hear from Nancy Price.
Hello, everybody. I'm getting a repeated message saying that
Her internet is unstable, I guess.
Yes, Nancy, I don't know if you can hear us. We see your frozen visage.
Excuse me?
You
We
were
hear you.
frozen.
Maybe Nancy can leave and come back again, and we could move on to somebody else, and then she can try again.
I think
Maybe turn off your video camera, Nancy, and maybe it will be more stable.
I know Nancy wants to remind everyone about Earth Day coming up in April, but also International Water Day is this month. And I'm sure Nancy will tell us when International Water Day is.
I'm having trouble with my Wi-Fi connection. It keeps going on and off. So basically what I posted on the text pad is what I was going to speak about. It's pretty self-explanatory. There's some links to material and fact sheets that we will be producing on World Water Day, on Food and Water Watch's Water Act that they're going to submit next month in honor of Earth Day, and how to lobby for that. There'll be a fact sheet. And then we will have a fact sheet on the workshops that Margaret Edelman of the Earth Democracy Committee is offering to branches on the forever chemicals, the PFAS chemicals. And so I just urge you, because this is going to go off again, the wind is coming up here with rain and wind. So I urge you to look at the text pad, please, and look for some fact sheets and action alerts. Thank you. Sorry to be discombobulated here, but it's Mother Nature at work in Davis, California.
Thanks, Nancy. The Cuba and Bolivarian Alliance National Issue Committee is reminding us again to write to President Biden about restoring normal relations with Cuba. Committee co-chair Cindy Domingo couldn't be with us, but she did send this announcement. The Cuban and Bolivarian Alliance Committee alerts WILPF US members to this event on Saturday, March 11th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Cuban Solidarity Rally. End the US blockade. Take Cuba off state sponsors of terrorism list. Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz Memorial and Education Center, 3940 Broadway at 165th Street in Manhattan, New York. They request our members and the public write to President Biden to insist that he normalize relations with Cuba, end sanctions, and remove Cuba from the list of states sponsoring terrorism. There is more information that you can find out about this in the text pad. And finally, we want to leave you with an announcement that today, March 9th, the Black Alliance for Peace held actions across the country to counter plans that are being made in Atlanta, Georgia. Plans to greatly expand and weaponize their police force. Black Alliance for Peace called for a national day of action against police terror, and there were actions occurring in several cities across the US. In the wake of the brutal killings of Tyree Nichols and forest defender Manuel Tortuguita, the city of Atlanta is going full steam ahead to build what activists have dubbed Cop City. Atlanta officials have proposed a $90 million complex be built on 85 acres of forest land. This would only arm and deploy more police, a domestic army, in African and colonized working class and poor communities.
Placing Cop City in the heart of a still majority African city is an insidious reminder of the collaborative nature, the way the capitalist minority intentionally divides people of color to serve their goals. It also makes clear this minority is preparing for the massive use of physical repressive power to maintain control of its internal colonies. Now, what can you do about it? What can any of us do about it? Well, while this is a terrifying moment for people of color, especially those in Atlanta, it's also a moment for allies like us to stand with protesters as they lead continued resistance efforts. The Black Alliance for Peace offered some great organizing tools on their website for today's event, but probably the best way our mostly white members can support this resistance is to actively talk about it in your branches, your communities, your circles of influence, and to make this situation better known. It's also a great time now to actively reach out to Black organizers and people of color who are organizing in your city against police violence. It's not up to us to lead on this, but it is up to us to make our support known and offer to be of assistance in any way that makes sense, by showing up as WILPF, by donating when possible, and tirelessly raising the issue in many different groups. This is something the mainstream media is just not covering.
Y'all, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for this One WILPF call. Remember, the next call is Thursday, June 8th at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Mountain, and 4 p.m. Pacific. Make sure to lock that into your calendar right now. If you are on our WILPF mailing list, you'll automatically get an e-alert reminding you, and we'll announce our feature topic in that alert as well. And if you or someone you know has interest in helping plan the June call, please email info@wilpfus.org ASAP. Thanks, y'all, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you for being with us.
Be sure to hang on for the informal soapbox segment if you can. It follows immediately this call. That's where we hang out and share feedback from the call, more discussion, and information about what's going on with each other personally. Let's all unmute now and say goodnight, and I'll meet you right back here for the soapbox.
And we wish you good night.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.